We're live. Welcome everybody here to the Lakers Lowdown Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Lakers Insider for Lakers Daily. Today on the show, JJ Redick was officially announced by the Lakers. The Lakers emailed me personally to tell me about the news. Super excited to get that one. Had a good idea because of a back and forth that I had with a buddy of mine on Twitter. Maybe I should start replying. Should I start saying like, "Hey guys, how you doing? How you holding up?" All those things. But no, JJ Redick was announced by the Lakers officially and then unveiled to the local press there via press conference. As one would expect, handled it really, really well. But I thought that this presser gave us some insights into the process, even though Rob didn't want to talk about the process. It gave us some insight into the timeline, which hopefully is the last time I have to talk about that here today. And it gave us some insights into the offseason and the direction that the Lakers are going to be taking here moving forward. So let's dive on in. So JJ Redick is an incredible communicator. Right. This was the first time in Rob Pelinka's tenure as head basketball decision maker for the Lakers that he came off as the lesser communicator on that stage. First, it was Frank Vogel. Vogel's a coach's coach, right? And he said all the right things, but it wasn't anywhere near as charismatic as I think Pelinka is and was certainly at the time before I kind of got sick of the nonsense. And then Darvin Ham, I thought had a couple good lines here and there, but you could tell, once again, Rob Pelinka was like the more confident person up there on that stage. This time, however, this was the very first time that I would say, Rob, between the two people up there on that stage, looked, I guess, not less prepared, because I thought both guys were prepared, but like this was the first time that he was not, I think, the more charismatic person up there on that stage, the more confident person up there on that stage. He had your typical Pelinka type quotes, and we'll get to some of them here in a second. But I thought for the most part, Redick handled questions better. I thought Redick, and look, Redick is, coming off of a very productive career as a professional communicator. So this is to be expected. This is kind of where Redick, it honestly, he lends himself perfectly to this kind of a moment. And I thought he lived up to that moment quite well in a variety of ways too. So we'll talk about Redick and some of the insights that we can kind of glean from some of his quotes. But I did want to start with a moment right at the beginning of the presser where Rob Pelinka kind of spells out how Redick was always the guy. So he starts, he does the normal, like, this is a great day for the Lakers and we're really excited, yada, yada, yada. But he says something really interesting here about the approach that the Lakers were taking to this hire or to this process right from the get-go.
It's an exciting day. When we set out on the journey to name the next Lakers coach, we really had in mind concepts around innovation and challenging ourselves to be forward-thinking. I think in industry in general and in sports in specific, sometimes it's easy to get caught up in patterns of being in a sea of sameness and doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. But when we embarked on this search, it was really important for us to see if we could do something a little bit different.
Do something a little bit different. Hiring a first-time coach with zero coaching experience in the NBA to coach the most win now player in the NBA in LeBron James is certainly different. Mission accomplished there. But like a note that I want you guys to kind of go back to there is Rob saying that from the onset they wanted to push themselves to be a little different here, to do something that was a little bit more forward thinking than other teams. I think that's a little too kind of high and mighty there. I think that's kind of patting themselves on the back a little bit and trying to kind of convince themselves of a hire. But one thing that I took from that is, like I've reported from the get-go, the Lakers headed into this process, according to the people that I spoke to close to the Lakers, um, hoping to be wowed by JJ Redick. And obviously, you saw Redick in this setting, you knew that he was going to wow them. So when, Woj was doing the whole Hurley thing and trying to convince everybody that it was always Hurley and that there was nobody else at his level in this search, it was always bullshit. Like, it just was. Nobody believed it. Nobody that I spoke to around the league believed Woj when he was trying to do that. Why he did that, I have no idea. I have no earthly idea. I think the most kind of pervasive response that I've gotten when I've asked why he did that was that he was trying to stick it to Shams and make Shams look worse by reporting the way he had, that Redick was kind of the focus of the search, which, by the way, as Rob outlines here, he was. And as people told me throughout this process, Redick was the focus. He was the person who spent the most time at the top of the list, maybe for a brief little bit, during that 4-day period that resulted in Dan Hurley getting a contract offer. Maybe you could make I think there's a real argument to be made that Hurley was the guy at the top of the list. But apart from that 4-day stretch, I would say that over the 6-week period, Redick spent the most time at the top of that list. Sure, maybe Borrego kind of figured into it. At one point, Rob Pelinka said that Anthony Davis was very involved in the search. That would kind of explain why Borrego was always a name that kind of hung around the top of the list here for the Lakers. That was probably somebody that AD kind of preferred over the field. But I think when it comes down to it, and as Rob kind of explains there, the Lakers fell in love with the idea of hiring a communicator first and foremost that they could kind of mold into a great coach. Now, Redick has to have some of his own character traits that would indicate that he would be good at this beyond being a good communicator. Communicating is only one, it's a very important step along the path of becoming a good head coach, but it's not the only one that you have to take. And Redick has according to the people that I've spoken to who are kind of close to him, Redick is like, his attention to detail is second to none. And he has no problem saying the thing that needs to be said, even if it might ruffle some feathers. So when the Lakers said that they were really looking for somebody who would hold people accountable, Redick is that kind of a guy, as we'll talk about here a little bit later, where Redick just starts dropping F-bombs. If Redick thinks that something needs to be said, maybe he'll find a political way of saying it so he doesn't like fully piss people off, but he understands that occasionally feathers need to be ruffled in order to get the correct response across. And I think that was part of what the Lakers were kind of looking for here. But that was a moment from the very onset of this press conference that really kind of, hammered home the stuff that I have been reporting and others have been reporting, that JJ Redick has been had been the focus of this search right from the get-go. Maybe they went away from it a little bit. According to Rob, he's going to talk about the process at some unknown date. Maybe he'll do that on a podcast or something like that. But I tend to think, and I have thought throughout this whole thing, that Redick was the guy. And the reasons on that may have varied. Like, I thought early on that Redick would have been hired because if it didn't work out, you could kind of pin that on LeBron. But when LeBron kind of distanced himself and Rich Paul distanced LeBron from the search, that option kind of went away. And I thought it was really interesting that around that time, the noise surrounding Redick kind of changed and kind of shifted a little bit. So I, hearing that from Rob, though, hammered that home. And the next thing that he said here or the next kind of couple things that he said here that really caught my attention had to do with what the Lakers might be looking to do this offseason and in off seasons moving forward. All right, so I'm going to play a clip here from I think it was like moments later, but this is Rob Pelinka kind of talking about the way that the Lakers are going to be looking to build moving forward.
For people in the room that study this new cap system that we're now under in the NBA, there's a hard system with first and second apron, and I could get into all the details, but at the core of that is going to be the importance of a great franchise like the Lakers modernizing and leaning into
development was the next step there. I don't know why StreamYard does this thing where they end videos like a second early. But anyway, the last word that he says there is development, leaning into development. The Lakers aren't a particularly young team. They do have Austin Reeves, who's like youngish. They have Max Christie, who is youngish also. You have Jalen Hood-Schifino is young, and then they'll obviously draft some players here in this upcoming draft as well and look to develop those guys. But the notion of development and the focus on development and the reason behind it, according to Rob Pelinka, has to do with the current CBA. The thing is, though, this current CBA was in play last year. And when the Lakers decided at the deadline to not use any of their draft capital, and the excuse that they used at the time was that they were keeping their powder dry to be able to move all 3 picks if need be this upcoming offseason to improve the team, this kind of sentiment bumped me a little bit. We go back to Pelinka a little bit later in this in the presser, where he kind of expands on why it's important for the Lakers to draft well and really invest into the development of the young guys in this organization.
Our goal is to build a team that compete for championships. Whether that's in the short term or the long term, we always have to balance those two things. And I do think in this system, as I opened, some of the trades are more difficult, especially if you have a second apron team and a first apron team. There's a chance we'll be in the first apron. The trades are less prevalent than they used to be. So will we look for trades that help us become a better team? Absolutely. Are those trades, did they have the same probability that they did under the old system? No, it is a different system. So we've got to be mindful and thoughtful around that. And I do think, as I stated at the beginning, part of the road to a really, really good team, and you can look around the landscape of the league right now with many young teams doing really, really well, is going to be lean hard into that player development piece. And of course, part of that is drafting the right way. We've had a great track record here of drafting good players and developing them. And we're going to continue on that path as well. So that's not a yes or a no. If the perfect trade comes along and we can use picks to make it and win a championship, yeah, we'll do it. Is that trade going to be there? I don't know. It's harder in this system to find perfect trades.
It's harder in this system to find perfect trades. Circle, put a couple stars around it, underline it, highlight it. Perfect trades is the phrase that really kind of sent me there. You can't only make trades if they are perfect. You can't. Sometimes you have to make a compromise for the slight step forward that is needed for your team to continue to compete. When he's talking about how he's willing to make a trade, a perfect trade, or he's willing to move picks in a perfect trade if it makes them, or if it wins them a championship. It not like one move doesn't do that for you. You have to make multiple moves over time that take I guess first build momentum and carry that momentum forward so that over the years, your roster keeps getting better and better and better and better. And by the time you are finally, operating at an optimal level, you have, utilized all of the assets necessary to go out and compete for a championship. You look at the teams that played well in this postseason. Yeah, they made big swing moves somewhere along the way. Minnesota traded for Rudy Gobert. Boston, right, trades for Kristaps Porzingis, and they trade for Derek White and those things. But like Boston drafted Jason Tatum, they drafted Jaylen Brown, they developed guys like Peyton Pritchard, and they developed guys, that they stuck with an Al Horford even as he gets to the advanced age that he is. You could look at Dallas, right? How they drafted Luka Doncic and got to a championship series, right? Or either championship or a Western Conference championship. I don't know. But they've had postseason success, and they screwed it up somewhere along the way, but they believed in Luka, and they believed that if they just surrounded him with an even okay team, he would take them to the levels that they expect themselves to reside at while you employ a Luka Doncic. And when I listen to Rob Pelinka talk about and look, by the way, look, a lot of lying was done on that stage. I am going to believe the stuff that aligns with the reality that I understand. The set of facts that I have in front of me. If somebody says stuff that aligns with those set of facts, I'll roll with that. And so maybe when he's talking about how the Lakers have to have an eye on development, and they have to have an eye towards the future, and how the CBA forces teams to really build in the draft and develop the guys that they draft. Part of that could be sending a message to the rest of the league that no, we're not just going to trade picks for the sake of trading picks, especially considering Alex Caruso was just got for the low, sub 16 type price of Josh Giddey. And I'm looking at this, and like I think it's possible that some of this is spin to send a message to the rest of the league that while the Lakers are open for business, they aren't going to just hand out draft picks if they don't need to. But I also think, though, that last line there at the very end of it, the perfect trade, and the notion of only making a trade if it wins them a championship. Multiple trades are required to win championships. Multiple correct decisions are made over the course of a time that a team gets put together to win a championship. And this moment here, like, this is why I say that I was more impressed by JJ Redick. And part of this is that my patience with Pelinka has run thin, if not out. But I thought that, like, this kind of moment and that whole, like, tech bro response that he had in talking about the way that the Lakers are looking to develop and gaming or gamifying the development process and all those things. Like, it's just shut up. Like, let's just, like, hear from JJ. I'm kind of done hearing from you. Unless you're willing to actually offer up some transparency on the process here or on what you're looking to do. Like, I'm good. I'm good. Just let me hear from JJ. And I, on that note, let's go ahead and segue over to some of JJ's better or more interesting moments. The first moment that, honestly, I'm going to play now, that I think really gives you a look into how JJ Redick operates, was his response to any kind of narratives that are out there that he thinks are wrong, or any of the noise that he has heard over the last, like, 6 weeks or so. His answer here was, I thought, telling. I thought, like, obviously a little rough around the edges given some of the language here. But I obviously, you guys listen to me on the regular. I'm not all that concerned about four-letter words. But I thought this gives you a real insight into kind of why I think he might wind up being pretty good at this.
It's a valid question, and I've certainly heard everything. It's been a really interesting 6 weeks or so, just in terms of being part of the engagement farming industry. It's been really interesting. However, I don't really have a great answer for your question because I really don't give a fuck. Like, honestly, I want to coach the Lakers. I want to coach the team. I don't want to dispel anything. I don't. I want to become a great coach in the NBA, and I want to win championships, and I want my players to maximize their careers. That's all I fucking care about.
Hey, Coach. Timothy Parker, Spectrum.
I let it play out there at the very end because I just love Rob's face where he's just like almost like swooning. That moment, like, I know that I kind of mocked the notion of comparing Redick to Kobe there, but that was a very Kobe moment. Like, late stage Kobe, I have something to say. I'm going to say it. I don't need to polish this anymore. I've been doing this for 2 decades. I'm confident in what I present and what I offer. Here's me just talking about why I don't care what these people think about me, even though generally speaking, all of these people really care about what people say about them. But I thought that there was a really good moment there. I thought that was a really telling moment, and why I say that it gave me a little bit more faith in Redick, handling this opportunity well, is there are going to be times when he and a player disagree, or he and somebody in the front office disagree. Hopefully it's not Jeannie or Linda, because normally that means that the people who disagree with those guys those girls tend to see the door eventually. But I would say that, like, that moment, I've been saying throughout this process, the thing that I've been kind of excited about with JJ compared to Frank and even compared to Darvin is that those guys, their like first instinct is to kind of back off and placate. And I think with, unless they're like really up against the wall, I think there at the end, Darvin was pretty fed up with the media and was just letting it fly. But in that moment, JJ just basically saying, like, yeah, people are saying Stephen A. Smith has spent like the last month shitting on JJ Redick. I'm sure he saw that. I'm sure he heard that and didn't love it. Right? That's somebody that welcomed him onto his show. That is a teammate at ESPN. That is one of the louder voices, literally louder voices and louder platforms in the in NBA coverage, and Stephen A. Smith has taken every opportunity to say why this is actually a bad thing that JJ Redick would get this opportunity. But I in that moment where he was like, I've heard all of that stuff and I could dispel it, but I the best way to dispel it is to do the work, right? That's where he talks about wanting to be a great coach and wanting to succeed here with the Lakers and all of those things. But also on top of that, I want those people to know I don't need to dispel those things because I don't give a fuck about them. And I, like, you know what? I respect that. Hell, I wish I had more of that. My Twitter life would be better if I just, looked the other way when people were calling me a fraud. I should be, at this point, having nailed this story the way that I did. And frankly, this is probably how I'm going to do this moving forward. I have no time for that stuff. I know I have the information right. I'm going to move forward as such. And I think here with Redick, I think that's basically what he's doing, that, but in coaching version, where he's like, yeah, I know that they have things to say. I know they have thoughts on my lack of experience. He joked about his lack of experience right from the get-go in this press conference, but I don't care. I'm here to do a job, and my focus is doing that job well. I'm probably going to be clipping the I don't give a bleep. Like that's probably that's going to be in my video bank here in shorter form. Another moment that I thought was really kind of interesting here. This is a longer clip, but he was asked about how he wants to utilize Anthony Davis and how he wants to utilize LeBron James. And I think this once again, even while he is out here telling people he doesn't give a bleep what they think about him or all of those things, he still understands that this is a very collaborative position and explained how he's looking to do that with Anthony Davis.
Any player on the roster, I can have a vision for how I want to use them, but there has to be buy-in and collaboration, right? So I can sit up here and tell you how I would like for them to play, but if there's no buy-in, then it doesn't really matter. So I think part of the next 2 months, and I know those guys are going to be busy with Team USA. Part of the next 2 months is just having conversations. And Anthony and I already had a conversation a week ago. About some ideas, both offensively and defensively.
Monday? What'd you say?
I think both of us felt really comfortable going forward with that sort of as the base starting point of how he's going to play on this team. And one of the things I brought up with him is just the idea of him as a hub. There's a bunch of guys at the 5 position in the NBA that sort of operate in that way, and I don't know that he's been used in that way and sort of maximize all of his abilities. So that's a simple thing with him. With LeBron, look, you have to certainly get buy-in and talk to him about how he wants to play. Him and I have joked about this, but like he shot over 40% from 3 this year. Like I want him shooting threes. He's going to have his 3 or 4 bursts every game where he gets out in transition and does things that no one at his age should ever be able to do, but he does it. It's really just figuring out in the half court, putting him in different spots, both as a scorer and a facilitator. That'll be part of the conversation over the next couple months.
Yeah, it's all a conversation. It's a process, right? It's now this is where I'll be really curious, and this is where I think I'm most excited about this hire. In that, look, I like Frank Vogel. I thought he was a good coach. I thought he got a raw deal as Rob gave him a shitty roster and then fired him for not being able to make a shitty roster work. I like Darvin like as best I can as a person. You hear nothing but good things about Darvin as a person. As a coach, not so much, but as a person, neither of those guys were LeBron's preferred hire at the time that they were hired. Frank Vogel was the 4th choice of the Lakers by the time he was hired, but LeBron preferred Ty Lue. I think he was pretty agnostic about Monty Williams, but I think he probably would have preferred Jason Kidd over Frank Vogel. And with Frank, you get the immediate buy-in from, stars with a brand new coach, and that produced a championship. But I thought that LeBron's interest in Frank's message waned very quickly because Frank wasn't the guy that LeBron wanted in the first place. And then with Darvin Ham, I think, LeBron preferred Phil Handy. And we'll see if Handy comes back to the Lakers here. All of this talk about development and stuff like that makes me think that Phil is probably going to be getting a call here soon, because there just isn't anybody better than Phil in the sport at developing at least the individual skills for young players. So I would imagine Phil gets a call here soon. Again, that was a strong suit from Miles Simon, who coached in the G League and obviously maintained that relationship across 2 different coaching staffs. If development is the focus there, I think Miles Simon makes a lot of sense, and I know that there is mutual interest there. But like in this moment and moving forward here with this team, I'm really, really curious to see what it's going to look like for LeBron to respond to the coach that he preferred. Rob said that LeBron was very supportive, but not involved, and in this search. But it's also the guy that LeBron would have preferred. Like I've been told that Redick is the guy that LeBron preferred in this coaching search. Now, if Lou was available, I think we're having a different discussion here. But Lou was never realistically available, and this whole notion that JJ and LeBron never spoke until JJ either accepted or was offered the gig. Don't quite buy that. LeBron was texting Dan Hurley apparently. Somehow I think you probably sent a couple messages JJ's way as well. But I'm really, really curious to see what it's going to look like this season. And like what LeBron is going to be willing to do for a coach that he believes in more right off the bat than his previous two Lakers head coaches. And, look, we always talk about this. Culture is set from the top, and then it kind of trickles down. And if the superstar or the loudest voice or the most important voice in that locker room, if you get the sense ever that he isn't 100% in on a head coach, chances are his teammates are going to sense that as well. And they also are going to kind of wane in terms of interest in that coach's message. This time around, though, with LeBron being 100% on board with Redick as the head coach and with LeBron preferring Redick, I do tend to think that this will help set a more productive culture than the Lakers have had over the last few years. That isn't to say that the Lakers didn't enjoy success despite not having the best culture per se, but these things matter. Like if they didn't matter, Miami wouldn't outperform expectations all the time. If they didn't matter, Boston sticking with the 2Js wouldn't have paid its dividends in this last year. If culture didn't matter, like honestly, sports would be way less interesting to talk about or to watch because culture is this intangible, undefinable thing that you can't track with numbers. You can't. It's why these teams that are too analytically inclined tend to ignore it and wind up suffering as a result of it. The Clippers for years now have ignored the notion of culture and ignored the notion of human beings working together with a common goal in mind. They ignore that, and eventually they run up against the same ceiling. For a long time, Danny Ainge ignored that in Boston, and I don't think it's a coincidence. Once Danny Ainge was no longer in Boston, that's when the Celtics went out and won a championship with that core that Danny Ainge kind of started. I think, Redick and understanding how collaborative this is going to be, and LeBron buying into Redick right away, that's really exciting, man. It really, really is. And at the end of the day, like it's just, it's why Redick was brought in the first place and why he was considered for a job that frankly he isn't qualified for. Like he just isn't, in terms of typical qualifications, he isn't qualified for it. But even in that regard, he is somehow almost more qualified for this position in this one specific way than his two predecessors in this position. It's a super fascinating subject. One that, by the way, on tomorrow's show, Miran Fader and I are going to talk about how qualified Redick is and the process that went into hiring him and whether there are some questions that need answering on this front. But, for right now, as it pertains to LeBron and as it pertains to Anthony Davis, this is really exciting. I'm really excited about this specific thing. Now, in terms of clips and stuff like that, clips and quotes, that was all that I found, noteworthy enough to throw onto the show here. And by the way, all of those clips come by way of youtube.com/@Lakers. They streamed it online, and then I was able to grab the video from them on there. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about here are some of the names that were mentioned or not mentioned at various points. Obviously, you heard Redick talk about the way that he's looking forward to working with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That kind of goes without saying. He also said, Redick did, that he has spoken to Austin Reeves recently about the role that he is going to be playing. Rui Hachimura was asked specifically about by, I believe, a member of the Japanese media. And so it's kind of a cheat code here, but Redick did have an answer in mind for what he is hoping for or expecting from Rui this upcoming year. He wants him to shoot more threes and become a better offensive rebounder. Couple of names that didn't get mentioned here. And then like other guys, right? I think like Max Christie was named as a member of the young core. I think Jalen Hood-Schifino was also mentioned as a member of that young core as well. Colin Castleton, I believe, also. But guys who weren't mentioned were Jared Vanderbilt and, most interestingly, D'Angelo Russell. We know what that situation is. I said on the show yesterday that the Lakers are basically operating as if D'Lo was going to opt out, but wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he opted in because of the way that this market is coming together. I had that confirmed today by another few sources that is the case here, that the Lakers are basically, again, that they anticipate, or they are, operating as if D'Lo was going to opt out, because that is something that you then need to act on. But if D'Lo were to opt in, it wouldn't necessarily completely surprise them, because this market has been really wonky. That said, if D'Lo opts in, he immediately is on the trade block. I think it's pretty clear here that the Lakers understand they need to split up Reeves and Russell. Whether that's moving Russell altogether and bringing in a guard who better builds up, or compounds on Reeves's strengths. D'Lo doesn't do that necessarily. Or whatever it is that the Lakers choose. Like maybe they choose to move D'Lo to the bench and start Reeves next year. Whatever that decision might be, I did find it interesting and noteworthy that D'Lo wasn't mentioned at any point while the Lakers were or while JJ Redick and while Rob Pelinka were talking about either the path forward from a schematic or cultural standpoint here in the organization, or talking about their options on the trade market or free agency and all of those things. Some of that might, I guess, if you want to get super duper technical, have to do with the fact that D'Lo has that player option, and they wanted to, stay away from that subject because of the process there. But that said, Rob did mention LeBron by name, despite LeBron also having a player option. I just found it really, really interesting. And then with Vando also, it's tough. You can't have two wings basically that expect starters minutes, but only basically add up to a two-way player. Now, Redick has talked in the past on his podcasts and various platforms about how you can utilize a player who doesn't shoot the ball as well, depending on the amount of shooting around them. But, with Vando, it's tough to have Rui, who is an offensive-minded player whose defense kind of wanes and stuff like that, but can, if he is scoring, have an impact on that side of the floor. Vando, however, is kind of tricky because he is a great, great, great defensive player. And he's somebody who does those little things that help teams win basketball games. But it's not even like Rui, where Rui's defense kind of comes and goes. Vando is never an offensive threat. At various points last year, it looked like Vando was afraid to shoot the ball, no matter how close he was to the basket. And that is a very difficult player to A, have in your rotation at all, and B, make work in the postseason, because those players get played off the court always. Just like we saw Jared Vanderbilt get played off of the court the last time we saw him in the postseason. Hell, he was healthy and he still got a DNP CD in last year's postseason. So, yeah, I don't think that they like omitted those guys' names because like to send a message and say that those guys are definitely not going to be back. But I also think it's noteworthy in that like you just never know on some of these things. And when you're in that kind of a moment and you have various talking points in mind, it becomes very telling what those talking points are or who isn't involved in those talking points. And in this case, D'Angelo Russell, I'm not going to go so far as to say that the Lakers, based off of the stuff that I've heard about D'Lo, I'm not going to go so far as to say that the Lakers think that they are just flat out better off without D'Angelo Russell, because it's just not true. But D'Lo does have a personality that can wear thin on you. And also, he always disappears in the postseason. It's just true. And from the Lakers' perspective, if winning a championship is the focus, you almost can't have D'Angelo Russell playing a starting role on your team, because eventually he's going to disappear in the postseason, and you can't have a 16 or 17 or $18 million player just not do anything for you as consistently as D'Angelo Russell doesn't do things for you in the postseason. And I think that is something that the Lakers are very aware of heading into this offseason, or if they bring him back next year, it's something that they'll be very aware of, that they'll probably need to address at some point next year. And then with Vando, same kind of thing. It's just a very, very, it's the inverse version of it where, I think Vando is probably a little bit more popular in the organization and in that locker room, but still you have to acknowledge the guy's shortcomings as a player and the impact that those shortcomings will have eventually if the goal is to win a championship. And maybe you can surround him with enough shooting that it doesn't hurt you as much. But eventually, if a defense can ignore a player, it is going to gum up an offense. And in order to be, productive enough or impactful enough to make up for that, you have to be damn near the greatest defensive player in the history of the sport. And I'm sorry, Jared Vanderbilt is not that. So I found it really interesting how they, how those guys' names didn't come up. And it'll be really kind of interesting to see how this offseason plays out for both. All right, we have, was a very, very active audience here tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and play this bad boy. All right, so I'm going to start at the top here. Matthew writes, Anthony, thoughts on the F-bombs by JJ at the intro press conference? I'm all in. I'm with you, Matthew. I really am. I loved it. You know what? I loved it so much. I'm going to play it again because I need to cough. Where is it? Here we
go. It's a valid question, and I've certainly heard everything. It's been a really interesting 6 weeks or so, just in terms of being part of the engagement farming industry. It's been really interesting. However, I don't really have a great answer for your question because I really don't give a fuck. Like, honestly, I want to coach the Lakers. I want to coach the team. I don't want to dispel anything. I don't. I want to become a great coach in the NBA, and I want to win championships, and I want my players to maximize their careers. That's all I fucking care about.
Hey, Coach, Timothy Parker, Spectrum Now.
Man, I love it. I love it. I love a coach with a little bit of fire to him. Like it, or at the very least, so a topic in the household lately is that I am a Scorpio and how, like, I guess I'm not really an astrologist or anything like that. But I do find some of it kind of interesting. I like those kind of weird theoretical, universes that people live in. But, but Jen always likes to point out that I'm a Scorpio because, I have kind of a biting personality that if I feel cornered, I am going to say something that gets people off of me. It gets me in trouble on Twitter. It's gotten me in trouble over the course of my life. I guess it's just part of being me. I think that your coach needs to be capable of that. Yeah, I think your coach needs to, in the right kind of moment, in the right kind of setting, remove that filter and say, "Hey, dude, what the fuck?" and just let it rip. Because sometimes that's all that needs to be said sometimes, right? Um, if LeBron has given up 5 straight 3-pointers to the guy that he's guarding, I would hope that when he gets back to the huddle, Redick kind of goes like, "Hey, dude, like we need you to at least care. Maybe like get a hand up for number 6. Let's try that." Right. And no matter how he needs to convey that message needs to be conveyed, and you need to be able to hold that guy accountable. And I just don't know how consistently a coach can convey that message if they aren't willing to ruffle a few feathers. And that moment was just, I love that moment. I'm glad other people are enjoying it too. Marley Villasenor writes, hearing JJ talk about how he plans to get more offensive rebounds and how he wants to create more open threes really makes me feel at peace compared to the last guy. Yeah, absolutely. These I'm a math guy. I entered college very immature, and the point, the goal was to exit college as a civil engineering major. I just skipped too many classes and I wasn't able to get it done. But I've always just kind of seen the world in a very practical fashion. I am my dad's son. Now, when I think about basketball, it's very, very simple to me. If you are not going to be a great 3-point shooting team, you need to make up for that statistical disadvantage by, finding an advantage elsewhere. So when Redick is saying that he wants more offensive rebounds, i.e. possessions, and he wants to create more open 3-pointers, those are two very, very important advantages to build on over the course of a game. And so hearing him talk about those things, and hopefully eventually kind of specify how he wants to do those things or arrive at more possessions or more open 3-pointers that come within the flow and all of those things, and that players can predict that they're going to be able to shoot. That's a very important element here. Like those are things that, like, I was hearing, I'm like, yes, all right. Those are at least, like those are at least paying, verbal dividends to how important those things are, because they're very important. And if you aren't even willing to acknowledge them in a setting like this, chances are you're not going to care enough about them when the time comes to care about them. And in this case, he did. And I was happy to see it. Jabari McIntosh asks, how do I become a member? There should be underneath this video here, there should be a button there as far as subscribing and or becoming a VIP. And at the very least, Jabari, give me your @ on Twitter and I'll walk you through the process. But those are things that I'm always happy to help people figure out. Rye Guy writes Murray and DFS plus keep Reeves in 17, then Rob wins the summer. So Murray is going to be tough. I know that the Lakers are interested again, but Murray is going to be tough for all of the same reasons that it was difficult to bring him out to LA at the deadline. DFS, I do think his price has dropped, especially after the Alex Caruso trade. And I think some of these sellers are kind of scrambling now that there are more sellers. And there are at least commensurate sellers to buyers. That ratio isn't so far out of whack at this point. So I think that'll help. And then, if you're able to keep that number 17 pick, this draft is really difficult to pinpoint on the direction that anybody is going to go in, because I don't think anybody really knows who was going to be available when. But I do get the sense that the Lakers are really looking to draft a big at 17 that they think can either spell Anthony Davis or ideally play alongside Anthony Davis. And Deron Holmes really kind of comes to mind for me there. Jabari McIntosh again. Hey, Anthony, love the show. How well will the Lakers develop Christie, JHS, and Maxwell Lewis? What are their roles this year? Will they develop their 2 picks this year? And that's the goal. They've at least paid it lip service to this point. Christie, this is what's funny. I wish, this is I think there's a real case to be made that Christie should start this year next to Austin. Unless the Lakers find a clear-cut, obvious upgrade at the 2, I would rather start Christie and bring D'Angelo Russell off of the bench than trot out Austin and D'Lo again, because we know what the ceiling on Austin and D'Lo is. Christie needs to find minutes. That's what was so maddening watching Darvin Ham. The Lakers didn't win enough to be able to say that they didn't need to change things up. And they also didn't develop the guys that you needed to develop if you aren't going to do enough winning. And, that's why Darvin Ham is currently an assistant coach in Milwaukee. But Christie, to me, I'm going to do it again this year. I'm going to walk around Vegas and I'm going to, speak to high heavens about how I believe in Christie and be called a crazy person again. Now, Maxwell Lewis is a little tougher. I can see the physical tools there, but I don't know. The Lakers are already pretty deep at wing, and I would anticipate an upgrade on the wing that makes it kind of difficult for Lewis to find minutes. And then, if the Lakers are going to draft Bronny, which I'm told that they are, trying to find a way to do it without completely throwing a wrench in their offseason plans, i.e., I don't think the Lakers want to take him at 17. But, if they draft Bronny, I don't see the point in having Bronny and JHS together on this team. They're very similar players. And, if you have both of them, one of them just isn't going to play ever. So I would probably say that, it's kind of tough because with JHS, you're basically trading a near lottery pick from just last year as nothing more than salary, basically, because of how bad a season he had as a rookie. But, if you're going to draft Bronny, I just don't see the point in having JHS. So as Rob said, they are going to be, and Dan Wojcicki has reported this. I was able to confirm it, that the Lakers are really going to be looking to invest across their organization. How they're willing to do that, I have reported that they were going to do that in the past, and I didn't really see it come to fruition in the way that I was hoping. We'll see what that actually looks like. and hopefully they'll actually announce those hires so that we can track them over the course of the offseason. But yeah, the point apparently here with the way that the Lakers are operating in this new CBA is to draft and develop players, which also makes you cheaper. But like it if it is a priority, it's the right priority to kind of focus on. Matthew, Anthony, you always talk about the Lakers not being transparent about their process. Don't you think doing that gives away leverage in their plans? No, because like there is no like magic trick here. Everybody who hires a good head coach goes about doing it the same way. Yeah, they identify some favorites early on in the process, but they bring in droves and droves and droves of candidates to talk to them and learn about what makes that candidate special, or what they need to learn about themselves to make whoever they hire work. Like that process, if the Lakers were to like talk about that process, everybody else around the league would be like, oh, finally, they're doing it the right way. This year's process, like, I'm sorry, it feels kind of lacking. They started this process liking Redick. They liked Redick. They like Redick. They like Redick. At some point, I think that there was a handshake deal in place, just waiting for the finals. And then the Hurley thing happened. And that was the only time that they really kind of stepped away from Redick as the guy. And then they wound up with Redick. And there's just like no, like, where's, like, sure, yeah, you talk to Borrego. They never took Borrego seriously. I really don't think so. I think it just doesn't appear that way. Yeah, I think maybe they interviewed Sam Cassell, and maybe I think they did interview Kenny Atkinson, but like when I covered the Dodgers when they were hiring Dave Roberts, it was name after name after name after name, and what kind of interview they were in for, and what they were looking for, and what they learned, and all of those things. Like, that information was right there for me to very easily learn from. And when they finally arrived at Dave Roberts, I had confidence at the very least in the process that got them there. I personally liked, what was his name? Gabe Kapler. He was another like kind of high up candidate for that position, but we've seen how those two guys' coaching careers have gone. Roberts was significantly better and has been significantly better at this than Kapler has been or would have been. And the Dodgers could have been, felt confident going into their relationship with Roberts, knowing that they did all of the work necessary to arrive at the right guy. And at no point in any of these searches have I ever felt like, all right, this process is going well. Like, nobody could have, like, and if you're concerned about giving things away, like, sorry, the Lakers aren't so far out in front of everybody else that they are going to be giving away secrets to, frankly, smarter organizations, better run organizations. And like, that transparency, it only serves, like, if the Lakers had hired JJ Redick and they had kind of walked us through this process more thoroughly, Lakers fans would have a lot fewer questions about JJ Redick, the potential head coach, than they currently have. That's the whole effing point behind public relations, is to strategically give out information that, lets your audience feel better about whatever it is that you're doing. It's the whole damn point. Like, I don't know why the Lakers are so bad at this still. Partially because they don't pay their PR people enough, but partially because, like, they're so insulated that they're just always going to pat themselves on the back for what they convince themselves is the right thing to do at the time. And that process has lacked here again. And look, that isn't to say that you could have bad process and good results. It happens all the time. Look at my entire effing career. Somehow, my dumbass has made a living doing this, drunkenly stumbling throughout my career, somehow I arrived here. So like process isn't always like there isn't always a direct correlation between process and immediate results. What I will say though is that poor process does eventually predict poor results eventually. Good process eventually is a good predictor of good results eventually. How far down the line, that obviously is the $1 zillion question. How do you arrive at those good results as quickly as you possibly can? But when you have good process, you are typically going to arrive eventually at good results. And I just, there's a reason that the Lakers are on their third head coach in whatever it is, 5 or 6, no, 7 years under Rob Pelinka. Rye Guy asks, Dinwiddie moving like he's not a free agent and back. LOL. I haven't paid enough attention to various players' social medias and what they're saying about the experience of being a Laker and all those things. I think I would welcome Dinwiddie back. I'd be fine with it if he was on a minimum. I think Paul makes a little bit more sense just from the standpoint of having that kind of assistant coach out there on the court to help JJ Redick learn on the fly. And like I saw people saying that, like, well, what if Rondo and Chris Paul don't get along? Well, then don't bring Rondo in. Like, he's just an assistant coach. I'm not so desperate to hire Rajon Rondo that I'm not bringing in an actual player who's going to impact the game on the court. Like that's just not how this is going to play out. But I'd be fine with Dinwiddie. You only bring in Dinwiddie if you probably move Russell or if you move Gabe Vincent, but I'd be all right with him. Benjamin G writes, I'm worried Pelinka laid the groundwork for running it back without actually saying those words. He definitely did. Like there was, a message there that, trades are tough, everybody. I'm just saying those trades are tough. This new CBA really means that you got to develop in the draft and bring in cheap young talent. All of those things like, okay, all right. Yeah. Then why didn't you trade anybody at the deadline? Like, why didn't you trade for anybody at the deadline before the CBA became as punitive as it is right now? Like, why didn't you take that advantage then? Like, again, I don't know. I use car salesman stuff, I guess. Justin Tyndall writes, apologies if you already covered it, but yes to Murray for me. Hell no on Grant, a third scorer giving up substantial assets who's not a defender. Well, Grant did defend in Denver. Like, essentially Grant was like a hyper athlete at OKC that Denver brought in basically to do the things that Aaron Gordon has dedicated himself to doing since Grant left. And like those the talent is there to do those things. The problem is he hasn't cared about those things in multiple years. And I think maybe he's gotten a little too used to being able to operate with the ball in his hand. And I think that has led to some kind of unfortunate habits. But the problem with Grant is he's crazy expensive. That extension makes zero sense whatsoever. And I don't think the Lakers want to be tied up in that, Jeremy Grant for that much money. K-Will writes, no Mitchell extension yet. Any chance he doesn't sign? I'm going to be honest. Whatever's going on in Cleveland right now is really kind of throwing me. They went from Borrego, according to anybody you were talking to around the league. Borrego was the guy. He was the guy. It's just a matter of when. And then apparently Dan Gilbert got involved and told them to hire Kenny Atkinson. So that process was a little weird. And once the owner gets involved and makes decisions unilaterally, it becomes basically impossible to predict what that team is going to do because the only person at that point who knows what they're going to do is the owner, and the owner doesn't have to talk to anybody. It's actually technically kind of difficult to get in touch with the owner to figure out what they're thinking about doing. So I would still say that, Shams, I saw reported that things were moving towards Donovan Mitchell signing a 4-year, I think it was like $209 million contract extension in Cleveland. If that's on the table, Donovan probably takes it, and I don't think he'll be available. But look, I thought Borrego wasn't going to be available, and I thought Borrego was going to be the coach in Cleveland, and it turns out he is not. All right, last question here. Justin Tyndall writes, shocked at not one Darvin question. Here's where I got to give credit to Rob Pelinka, because he basically said right at the onset of the I almost called it a podcast. Right at the onset of the press conference, he basically said, like, the focus of today is JJ Redick. And I think everybody else there took that to mean he isn't going to be answering questions about Darvin Ham either. And, maybe that was like, that was him kind of learning from his prior lessons. He answered questions about Darvin Ham or situations extending beyond the head coach at the last two head coach press conferences. And it led to kind of a mess. And to Rob's credit, he sidestepped that question, and the beat reporters decided not to pursue it further. Now, normally at these press conferences, you'll have availability off to the side, and certainly you'll have opportunities for one-on-ones as well. And so maybe, one or a few of those beat reporters got quotes directly from Rob on the process there that weren't in the press conference kind of situation. That's something to keep an eye out for from, those platforms, whether it's the Times or the Athletic or ESPN. But I was also kind of surprised. But also, like, I honestly don't even need to hear that stuff from Rob at this point. It's all going to be used car salesman, not Carl salesman, but it's all going to be kind of snake oil salesman, kind of like talking points and stuff. And I don't know, like I've listened to this guy talk for long enough that I'm just kind of sick of it. Like I'm done. Just be normal. like just, he was here. I'm going to read this quote if I can find it. He was asked about like the notion of here we go. So he was asked about like adding to the analytics department and adding to like the organization at large. Pelinka, that's a great question, Dylan. That's a go-to move there for Rob Pelinka to like make a report. Oh man, great question, Dylan, and I know your name. And I think you've hit on a really important theme. JJ and I have had some really robust conversations around innovation and sort of gamifying player development. If you think about a 20-year-old basketball player today and maybe a 20-year-old basketball player, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, the modiums of learning are completely different. I mean, we all probably, some of us have kids, we have nephews, nieces, kids and athletes are learning in new and innovative ways. So we've talked about how do we translate Coach Redick's offensive system to app-based or phone-based deliverable where players can be buying into a philosophy and learning it in a way that meets today's young player. And I think innovation has got to be at the core of that. We have a vision for, to your point of hiring out the support staff and sort of tech bullpen, a way of innovating minds to help bring basketball strategy and bring his basketball philosophy to life in a way that our players can grasp it. My eyes are glazing over while I'm saying all this. Learn it and grow their basketball IQ. I think there's no one in the room that would argue that JJ is not one of the highest basketball IQ players and thinkers in today's game. How do we now take that and deliver it to our players? That's our goal here and something we're really, really excited about. The Lakers don't have anybody who's like 20 years old. Like they have like Max Christie, who's 21. And I guess Jalen Hood-Schifino is in that kind of age range as well. But I don't know. I guess I found all of this development stuff kind of annoying because you have LeBron James, you have Anthony Davis. What are you going to do to put them in an immediate spot to win a championship? So all of that like verbal diarrhea stuff, like it's just like just we're good. I'm good. Go back to JJ. Throw to JJ. Rob, stop talking. Like, like I'm good. Like just like we're good here. I'm plenty fine with hearing about the modiums of learning that children have nowadays. Basho writes, why would the Lakers not be okay with Rondo as head coach because of the issues, but would be fine with him as an assistant coach? Because a head coach is in many ways the face of your organization. They are now, the Lakers are somewhat kind of unique in that LeBron is the face of the organization. He is always out in front, talking to media and stuff like that. But in terms of the person who interacts with and speaks publicly the most with media, that tends to be your head coach. It's why Darvin Ham kind of wore on people throughout the organization the way that he did, because all of his press conferences started sounding the same. And if you have somebody in Rondo who has those issues, like literally currently going on, in the case of his gun and drug charges, that I believe again are in Indiana, he has to answer to those with every new development, and he would have to answer those questions there in that moment when he's getting introduced. You don't have press conferences for assistant coach hires. Those things don't happen. They basically get to kind of operate in the background, and it becomes easier to kind of deal with, or I'm going to say deal with those issues when it's somebody who isn't as forward facing as JJ Redick is going to be. Justin Tyndall writes, there has always been a Laker tax, but it seems to have gone through the roof since Pelinka has been GM. That is something I've thought a lot about, Justin, in that, you see that? I remembered your name, Justin, even though it's right underneath me. But like the notion of the Lakers tax and how it may have risen with Rob Pelinka. Look, Rob is a former agent who negotiated against a lot of the executives throughout the league. So his relationship with those GMs may not be the best. He also is not exactly known for upfrontedness, if you guys can catch my drift there. And the concern there sometimes with Rob is that if he is having negotiations, somehow, some way, those names make them become public and stuff. And sometimes GMs who are in the middle of negotiations don't necessarily love that. But yeah, like this is something that I have wanted the Lakers to add to their front office, is somebody who is like on a little bit better standing with other people throughout the league, so that maybe the communication between the Lakers and Team X is better than it has been the last few years. Like the reputation that Rob currently has, and you saw it. He talked about it in that press conference. He's looking for the perfect deal. And what that usually means is he's that guy in your fantasy league who is always offering these trades that you just kind of say, like, I never want to negotiate with you ever. I would rather deal with anybody else in the league other than this guy. And I think that's where the Lakers would be smart. I don't think it's going to happen. We'll see. But I think they would be smart to provide Rob with a little bit more support staff, specifically with people who have better relationships with others throughout the league. All right, that is going to do it for this episode here of the Lakers Lowdown Podcast. Thank you, everybody, a ton for all of the questions and the comments and stuff like that. A reminder, please do hit that subscribe button down there right below this this here video. Hit that like button as well. That also really helps the things that we are trying to do here in the lounge. And then keep an eye out. We have a fun episode tomorrow. I'm going to be joined by Miran Fader. I don't know. Like, we're going to be recording pretty early, so I think I'll probably wind up releasing it a little bit later in the evening here on YouTube, and then obviously the following morning in podcast form. So you have that to look forward to as well. Aaron, we'll see what kind of availability he has later in the week as well. But the good news is on Wednesday, we have the first round of the draft. And then on Thursday, we have the second round of the draft. I think I'm probably just going to hop on here and watch that here live with you. Let me know what you guys think about that as an option. So until then, and until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm Anthony Irwin saying, have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you tomorrow.